Hello, my friends, my dear gentle marketers. Welcome to the Gentle Business Revolution podcast, the show where we talk about marketing your business by disrupting the current hypey marketing paradigm and change it to a gentler approach, one that's based on empathy and kindness. As always, I'm Sarah Zinacroce, your host. If you're new here, well, this is the first time you hear me saying that I'm the host, but my regular listeners, they're like, yeah, Sarah, well, you're in the right place if you are a heart-centered entrepreneur or change maker who is looking for a better way to market your business. Or you might also be an entrepreneur who's simply tired of the traditional marketing model and are ready for a change. You might also be a marketing impact pioneer. That's someone who's not an entrepreneur, or not yet, but you're working in an organization who does business for good. So today, Penny and I are back with this special summer series of 6 episodes where we take a look at the 7 P's of gentle marketing and kind of look at it at the difference between the old perception of business and marketing and being in general versus the new perception. And today we talk about the P of pricing. And I just want you to know that this is not your regular episode. These are not edited. They're just raw, real human conversations about these old and new perceptions. All right, let's dive in and talk about the P of pricing, which is always intense because it has to do with money, and everything that has to do with money also has to do with ego. So some of the highlights of this episode is that we talk about the value again. We talked about this kind of in the product episode. We also talk about the psychology of pricing. There's a lot of these shoulds in marketing about that are supposedly based on psychology, and this is how you should be pricing and all of that. So we talk about that. We talk about overpricing and underselling and vice versa, about high tickets and all of that good stuff. Also about sliding scales and if it works and so much more. So I highly recommend you just, put in your headphones. You probably have already, but hopefully you're outside somewhere walking and get to listen to this conversation with Penny Pierce and I about pricing. Let's dive in. Hello. We're back with Penny Pierce with another session about the 7 P's of gentle marketing. And today we're going to talk about pricing. And I'll bring up my mandala again for those who are watching this on YouTube. So this time we're talking about pricing, and those are the other 7 P's. I hope you didn't miss any of the previous episodes. They're definitely all worth listening to. And I'm so glad that you're back here with me, Penny. Hey.
Me too. It's so interesting, actually, to do these 7 pieces because they all start interweaving, and it's very interesting. I hadn't ever thought of it this way.
Yeah, so. And it's for me, it's just great to have these conversations with someone like you who sees the big picture. I can see, like I've said in previous episodes, I can see little glimpses of the whole big picture. And then you come in, you're like, whoa, okay. And then every now and then I have to like pull you down.
Right. That's right.
So it's great. Yeah, it's great to have these conversations. So
yes.
Pricing, yeah, I kind of mentioned it already on the last episode when we talked about product, but pricing really, I had this, as we all go through these kind of ups and downs in our entrepreneurship journey, but I definitely almost had a burnout, I would say. I call it the underselling and over giving burnout. So meaning I kept my prices too low and I kept giving because that's what we're good at as empaths and, gentle souls. So we're very good at giving, but sometimes we need to actually get better at receiving because, as we said also in the product episode, it needs to be a triple win. If we are in business, we need to make sure that we win. There needs to be a profit for us because we are in business after all. It needs to be a win for our client because that's who we're serving. and hopefully, ideally, there's also a win for the planet. So that's what we're going to talk about today is this pricing piece, which is, yeah, it's just crucial. And pricing, profit, these words somehow all start with P's, but they're important things to look at if you're running a business. And so in my case, yeah, I put the prices too low, I think, in a way, because I thought that was the humble thing to do. That's how I was raised, be humble. And it didn't serve me well in the business experience.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd love to, talk about this with you, Penny, if you've ever experienced that, and how we can somehow still be humble, right? Because we want to serve our clients, but make sure that we also have this win for ourselves.
Right. It's a balance, I think, between, humility and ego, right? Like there's a distortion. There's a distortion at either end of that, right? Too much humility and thinking of humility in the old perception way means that I'm less than others and I lower myself below others as, to be respectful or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think of humility in the new perception as honesty, just simplicity, being what you are, what you really are,
right,
and not embroidering all these extra things and fluffing it up and trying to, be better than you are, because you are good anyway,
right.
So be true to that. And, and then the other polarity is ego, which is that inflated sense of just being yourself and feeling isolated, and then going into that whole need to control and be better than others and all that. So I think pricing, it really brings that up, because money and profit is about survival.
Yeah.
In the beginning. And then after the survival needs are met, then it becomes about self-worth. And then it becomes about the ego self-worth, the domination of the narcissistic kind of consciousness, having excessive wealth or just hoarding things, So that whole money piece is so interesting to think about it, and how it ties in with what we ask for from the universe.
And how we're able to receive, how open we are to receive, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it goes so deep. And I think out of all the modules and in the book, I write about that too. It's pricing, it touches so much more than just the price of your product or service. And again, like you mentioned, it has to do with your self-worth. So it really takes going deep, probably back to your childhood, and looking if there's anything attached there where you didn't feel worthy. Or I'm writing about it in the book, like for me it had to do with my dad and wanting to prove something. And so it goes really, really deep.
Right. A lot of emotional connections with the whole thing.
Yeah.
I remember when I was first starting out, and I wanted to be fair. Not so much humble. I guess that was a bit of that, but I wanted it to be fair, not too much, not too little. Right. So I made a sliding scale for my services.
Right.
But everybody paid at the bottom end.
Right.
And a few generous people, where it's like getting a big tip. It was like, oh, thank you, but they paid the whole amount, and I was like, but it was too little, and I ended up feeling really bad about myself, like I wasn't delivering very good service.
Right.
That people didn't feel good about it. So I finally stopped it and just made one price that was somewhere in the middle, a little bit more than average. And I just have stuck with that since then. And if people have trouble, then you can have payment plans, and you can have, other ways for that to happen, scholarships or whatever, but
Yeah, I think that's really worth going because when we kind of discussed these episodes, I think that's one of the things that we brought up. And I think it's really worth going into a bit deeper. Two things. I just released an episode about having fair pricing conversations. And if you are listening to this now, this is, I think it's episode 39, so you can look that up and kind of listen to that. And I was really kind of hesitating putting that out there because I'm talking about, just one service that I'm offering, but I'm stating my price, and I'm kind of going into why I'm asking for that price, and why for me that service has that value. And so it's like really out there. Like, obviously there's people who are going to say, this is way too expensive, I can get this way cheaper somewhere else. But to me, having that one rate was like a lot of work coming to that, and saying, no, this is the price that I'm sticking to, and I feel like I'm delivering that kind of value. And at the same time, I think it's easy for me to have one rate, but I also want to be open and flexible. So that's why I have other services where, people are maybe getting less of my one-on-one time, or it's just a video review or something like that. So I always want to give people options. And that's where I think it's fair, because they're like, look, we all have different budgets. I also don't maybe, want to have different options when I buy a service. So
Right.
I think that is a nice option to offer, to say, okay, this is another option. And then even then, if someone says, but I want this service, if my gut tells me, look, this is just the perfect ideal client, I'm not going to be stubborn and say, no, it's this or
Right.
nothing. If my gut tells me this is my dream client, I really want to work with her, I'm going to make exceptions. And I think maybe that's also the new perceptions. Like, well, the ego would tell me that, but this is my rate and I deserve this rate, right? But then
Yes.
maybe I can also be flexible and make exceptions.
Yes, that's part of the new consciousness, I think, is fluidity.
Mm-hmm.
We're always talking here in the new way of thinking about fine line balances
Right.
between, too much, like we said, it could be too much humility, too much sense of self becomes ego,
Right.
or, not enough. And then you have a fine line balance there. But where's the healthy medium?
Yeah.
Where you get those sense of self and also a sense of humility or fairness at the
Right.
same time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, I know if we're still talking about services here for a little while, but I have colleagues that charge very little, and they get typically a lot of people who are victims, right? Who even think that's too much,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really hard for them.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have other friends who charge outrageous amounts,
Mm-hmm.
and they get work too.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like the price somehow attracts a certain kind of client,
Yeah.
certain kind of consciousness
Yeah.
in the client. What happens with the really high prices, I have found, is that people start to make them into celebrities. There's a lot of ego involved in that in a kind of unconscious way.
Yeah.
Where then people expect a tremendous amount, and if they don't feel that they got it, then they act like victims also. And then they can really complain and be quite negative.
Yeah.
So I think that there's still around us I guess I would call it a celebrity consciousness, that people want the best person or the most famous person, or they want to work with the big name. Whether that person is really wise or not, they've made themselves into a kind of celebrity energy, and then they charge commensurately.
But please tell me that will change also in the new
Well,
conscious.
I think we are eclipsing the whole idea of ego at this point, that it's going to take a long time, maybe not a long time, but I think we are starting to see it, and it's too dysfunctional.
Right.
Right. So there's going to be a more evening out, and we'll see what happens to pricing when the hierarchical structures flatten a little more.
Yeah, because I write about in the book about, like you said, these programs or masterminds where it's like this high ticket to get in, right? But then you're really paying this celebrity, and you're not really paying for the value that you're getting.
Right.
And there seems to be this game now where people just they check how much they can get away with, and it just, so every year the amounts just keep on going higher and higher, and people actually pay it because they think they're worth more if they are part of groups, right?
Right.
And that bothers me. There's nothing wrong with having, paying for expensive services. I don't think there's anything wrong with that if there really is that value behind it.
Yeah.
So there needs to be value. It's not just like ransom money almost. It's like I pay you to somehow get free. I don't know what they're doing, but there's just something wrong with that high ticket pricing idea.
Yeah. And it's all the unconscious assumptions that are underneath that. They, all these things that were unconscious, and today, because the energy's expanding so much and higher frequency happening, all of that used to be invisible is coming to the surface.
Right.
And so those things that are kind of woven into, like, let's say, either very low or very high pricing, like unconscious victim identity, that will come out. It needs to come out to be cleared, and so I think that'll even out eventually, and what will happen when the hierarchies flatten and everybody is empowered sort of equally to do their part and their piece. Maybe we'll just gladly pay whatever the other person needs, and if they're really, really experienced, they get more. If they're not, they get what they get, and then they work their way up and they evolve in terms of price. And other times people just give a lot for free. I do that for, both ways, that if it's fun, like you said, if there's a certain person I really like working with, I'll give them extra time or whatever it is, and just because I'm having fun.
I think, and then we talked about, generosity in the product piece, and
yes,
and here what you just said, that's part of the pricing as well. If you have a price that you feel really good with, that you feel like, oh my God, I'm gonna give so much, I'm gonna blow this person's mind, right? Then you feel like, I'm getting what I need, and now I can really just like overgive because I feel respected and I feel valued, and there's not this frustration anymore where when they come back with an email and you're like, already I felt like they didn't pay me enough, now they want more of my time. And so it's this thing where it just doesn't feel good, where if you get paid fairly, you're like, oh wow, now I can just give without holding back.
Yes.
That feels good.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's the way it should work, and it's partly, I think we are going to become more involved with philanthropy and charity as a natural part of our life, right? And giving, and giving back, and that kind of thing. So we may work that into, the price, and say that 10% of this is going to charity, just so that the customer knows. Yeah. And that's makes people feel a little better about whatever it is. I liked, Paul Newman's salad dressings and popcorn and stuff, where everything that in that company, pretty much after it was the basic expenses, goes to charity.
Nice.
Yeah. Yep.
The other thing that comes up is this idea that you brought up earlier as well, is I think you mentioned it in product. It has to be easy, and meaning like the price needs to be logical. Like there's not any trickery, and maybe if I kind of confuse the client, they don't realize that they're actually paying more, or like these things that we've seen with the internet as well. It's like all this trickery in a way to get people to pay more. I think that is going to go away as well. People, the conscious client is just wiser and smarter, like we said.
What do you think about that theory of having three prices, low, middle, high?
Yeah, that's such an interesting concept, right? Because people say that's based on, or not people say, it is actually based on psychology, where you're somehow wanting to go for the middle option because you feel like maybe the lower option is, not really good enough for you, and the higher option is too much, so you go for the medium one. So I don't have a problem with that. It kind of it's an anchor where you realize, okay, this is the range, and okay, I feel okay with the middle range. The problem that these internet marketers, what they did, they tried to trick us into buying the middle product, but they actually made it much more expensive than it should have been, or they added a whole bunch of fluffy bonuses just to make it look like it's much bigger. But in the end, you got the same thing that you got with the lower end product. So it's the trickery that's bad. It's not the idea of giving people options. I like options, but it's when it gets, like trying to, confuse people, that's when I don't like it.
Yes. There's so much about psychology too with the pricing, like I remember studying this a while ago, how now everything it used to be $2.99, instead of $3. Now it's $2.97, like the power of 7, whatever that is, that makes it feel like, okay, that's the discounted price.
Yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But if you give a price that's a whole number, like $300 or euros or whatever, then people think that's a higher quality product.
Right.
It's interesting. And then there's all this research on putting different pricing things near each other or in different colors and all this stuff. That it's like,
and
oh
I
my
think
goodness.
we can use some of it if it's somehow not if it's not tricking people into buying. If we're just really saying, look, I understand maybe you don't have the budget for the higher option, but I really do want to give a VIP day, to people who can afford that. But if you can't afford that, then there's the middle. So I don't see a problem with that, but it got abused, and that's why it has, I think, a bad rap.
Right. Yeah. Well, so something about pricing then has to be about the value you're giving, right? And in the new consciousness, that value, it's the basic things, but it's an add-on that people want things that have higher consciousness to it, that they give back, they're spiritually aware, that it's service-oriented as well as self-centered, and that you're on a kind of leading edge. Because I think innovation is going to become a huge thing in the next few years. That there's going to be a lot of people getting extremely clear and awake and alert, and then working together in these collaborations, and then we're going to start solving big world problems. And I think it's going to kind of mushroom, and so anything that's really sort of on the innovative edge is going to be attractive to people.
They don't want the same old anymore. They want
right. And that's going to be kind of the thing. Right.
Again, I can't wait, because that really just sounds Yeah, it sounds so good to have these collaborations and not always just worry about ourselves first.
Right.
That kind of brings me back to ego. We mentioned it, but I think that is a big part, right? Whenever we talk about money, it is so much related to the ego. So what are we doing with this ego? Like, are we like applying Buddhism and we're just completely saying, let's get rid of the ego, or do we just learn to better know our ego and put it into its place when it's not supposed to come out?
Well, I mean, ego is, I think, an over attachment to the left brain as your identity. And the way the left brain perceives is the way the ego perceives. And if you think you are the ego, you will behave that way. But when that becomes more enlightened and you shift more to the right brain and you start to bring in that sense of, oh, wait a minute, I'm a soul. I'm it. I'm the soul in the body. And I do know what I'm doing because I'm connected to all these higher other souls and this big body of knowledge out here. And I can trust that. And that's a lot of the shift that people are making, so that the left brain becomes more the implementer, not the boss and the master of everything, and it has to let go of holding on to that control and power in order to relax and do what it's good at, which is making things conscious. But you don't want to make things conscious in such a way that they turn into rules, and then belief systems, and then those ideas become calcified and stuck, and then you can't grow. So as you shift more into that right brain way of being, the ego just turns into that sense of self, the normal sense of self as soul, which then brings in a whole different value system, right? Because then you're sharing, you're collaborating, things are much easier, and you go into the new perception. So I think ego is something that will at some point in history dissolve. Can't happen fast enough, in my opinion. But anyway, because it distorts everything we do, and it really, since it's all based on fear and separation, it creates hard-heartedness and violence and domination and victimization, and people think that's the way life is, that's normal, but it's not. So the whole profit motive in business is almost like the whole raison d'etre of life, that we exist to make a profit, not to have fun making things or working together or providing something of service and usefulness to others and to enjoy a community and those kinds of things, but just make money and satisfy your stockholders,
buy
and
more stuff to put in the garage.
right. And so I think that in business, profit motive is going to shift as well as things start to move on into the intuition age.
Yeah. I kind of expect the biggest pushback when I will talk about, gentle marketing, from people who come from this fear and this kind of ego-related fear, because what I expect to hear is, well, that's all well to talk about purpose and being gentle and all of that, but I still need to make money. I still need to pay my bills. And, that's first and center. So in a way, what I'm talking about in the book is well, okay, yes, that is clear. You have to be able to pay your bills first. And so maybe it's going to mean a slow transition, just like, we're slowly transitioning to more right brain stuff. But I think it needs to be addressed, because obviously otherwise these are the people who are going to say, what a bunch of woo-woo, who are they going to pay my bills? How is this going to work? So in a way, it's like, well, no, we hear you and we see you, that's clear. Yes, you need to first take care of your security and make sure that you don't just all of a sudden, if you're used to like hard selling and all of that, just go, here I'm right-brained and it's all good. and then nobody buys anymore. So in a way, it's like, well, slowly transition into that. I think that is important to say.
Yeah. I think when a lot of people are still coming from left-brained, old perception, ideas about business that involve willpower and force and that pushiness, then they're going to take the word gentle, just like humility, and misinterpret it and think that those are weaklings. That's nothing. They're never going to be successful. But what we're talking about is making a shift so that we integrate the whole brain, and we have this sense of not having to use force, not having to push, not having to be so willful, not having to feel so separate from things, and that there's an actual easier way to do everything that is more effective in the long run. And it's tricky because to the left brain, it looks like it's a failure, like it's stupid.
So, in fact, what they what the people that I think of they ask me, you have facts, data. So all of this left brain things, it's like, well, I want to see stats and data and proof. Right.
Yeah. So I think it's a matter of helping people understand energetically what transformation is, what is the shift of perception, how does it work, how do we apply it, and what kinds of results do we get from, like working with the non-physical realm to materialize the physical realm. That's, one principle that's part of it is like we always have an inner energy blueprint made of thought and emotion and vision and, the non-physical pattern of something that then as you drop it in frequency, it takes shape in a parallel way as a physical form. If you want to change the physical form, don't go working at it by chipping away at the form itself. Go back to the non-physical energy blueprint, change that, and the form will change very quickly. It's so much easier, right?
Less willpower.
That's just one principle, and when you start shifting over to this new perception, there are many of those principles. And so, yes, you can make money. Yes. Well, we can talk more about that when we get to the promotion piece. But yeah, I think that that the pricing, that fairness is going to be related to obvious value. Does that make sense? Like when people look at you and they start feeling into you and reading you and your whole business and product, they get, oh, here's somebody who knows what they're talking about. Here's somebody on a leading edge. Here's somebody who's putting those thoughts into practice and actually making a business out of it and staying in business with it. I'm going to trust them. Right. And so that's obvious that the values are being used, and so the price then is related to that. And you don't need necessarily all the stats from it, but you can have them then.
Yeah, and now I also think again about this B Corp that I told you that they make footwear with the wool from the sheep in Switzerland. And she told me, the co-founder told me that her customers are happy to pay more than the regular Nike shoe or whatever shoe, other brand, because they really value what's the story that stands behind issue, and they value the founder's values. So you
Right.
really, that plays into the price of the product. If you look at the, economically friendly soap or whatever, they're always a bit more because it costs more to make that kind of product. But the conscious client is actually happy to pay a bit more, not
and
double,
proud of the product.
Yeah.
Which then means that they promote it to their friends.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So it has a lot of benefits.
Yeah. It's a beautiful world we're going into.
Yes, I do think so.
Yeah. Anything else you want to?
Oh gosh, let's see. It's like supply and demand pops into my mind. And I think there needs to be, in the new perception, a way of, like I just said a minute ago, reading people or intuiting value in things. Because in terms of services, there are thousands of people now that are doing the work I've been doing for a long, long time. And there are people there who are actually addressing a lot of different energy levels or expertise levels or readiness levels. But this woman, Sandy Sedgbeer, who just started, she's in the UK. She's just started the No BS Spiritual Book Club because she thought, there are so many spiritual books coming out now and some of them are so superficial and fluffy, and they just say the same thing, and everybody wants to tell their story of how they did on their spiritual path, and it's all kind of the same thing. And she reviews books, and she said it's really hard weeding through these piles. So how do we know what are the really good ones? What has quality? And we may find more websites and things just doing that sort of thing, but I thought that was a really good idea, some kind of shortcut to get a sense of what are the good things and what do you resonate to be able to kind of cut through that supply and demand thing, because there's a lot of supply, but it might not be very good quality.
Yeah, I mean, with the birth of self-publishing, where anybody can self-publish a book, and as you know, I'm in the process, and it just is shocking to me how many providers there are, trying to help you publish your book, and you can tell that they're dealing with so many people, but a lot of them are probably just like ego driven, wanting to put their book out there, and I also came across people who are talking about lead magnets. The book is just a lead magnet. And so there's a lot of like you say, supply out there, probably a lot of not so good quality, and so in a way that will keep increasing. And so hopefully our intuition will increase as well, so we can actually tell which one is.
That's right. And I think it will. I think that's a big part of it too. So it's like to be able to see through the clutter of the supply in order to find, it's not so much the demand, that's a little bit maybe outmoded now, that it's more about quality and frequency matching, let's say.
Right.
Which of these products really matches where I like to live, in the kind of consciousness I like to have around me.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So if we bring that back to pricing, it has to do with the value. What value do you give it? If you're, have no experience and just come out there and say, this is my price, and you price it the same price as everybody else or even higher, then people are most likely going to question that value a bit more than
right.
in the past.
Right. Right.
Yeah. That being said, it doesn't mean, like, because we also said, well, you have to do your dues and work for your money. And there is still money to be made, even if you're just starting out. That's not what we're saying. We're not saying you have to, undersell yourself first and all of that. No. But it just needs to be fair, like fair to the client, fair to you.
Right. There's an audience for everybody.
Yeah.
There's a market for every level of consciousness.
Exactly.
So, and again, if you're working with frequency, and frequency matching, that the right people will show up out of your energy field or your reality bubble, that match your frequency. Mm-hmm. That's who I don't like the idea of attracting anymore, but it's more emerging. Mm-hmm. Things just emerge based on matching frequencies. Yeah. And it always has been that way, really. We're just getting really conscious about it now.
Yeah. How do we wrap this up? It was an intense.
Yeah. Well, I think people are willing to pay for things that match their vibration, or that are even a little ahead of their vibration, that they can, yearn toward and improve themselves by.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that.
And whether that's a service or a product.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, and products are really also going more into the third win, the win for the planet. Mm-hmm. So people are willing to pay more for, if it also includes their worldview, if it includes paying for the planet, saving the planet, and all of that.
Right. All the smart products, in a way, that's the kind of a new buzzword too. But that's again what we were talking about before, about innovation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But the smart products also are very interconnected with larger networks and things sometimes, so it gets more to the collective consciousness level, which is another new part of the intuitive age.
Right. Yeah, the last thing that I'll mention is obviously here we're talking about, entrepreneurship, but what also comes to mind is this conversation that we have more and more often, where millennials are wanting to work less. They're happy to take an 80% job for less pay and have a more balanced life, right? Yeah. So it really shows that it's not just about the money anymore for the newer generations. They're like, what do I do with all this money if I can't even spend it because I'm working so hard and don't have any free time? And it's just, they're being more logical about the whole thing.
Right. Yeah, that's the direction things are heading, I think.
Yeah.
Ambition is turning into enthusiasm.
I like that. Yeah, that's wonderful. I like enthusiasm. It feels so much more like ambition just gives me like, I pull up my shoulders and I feel all like crisp, and enthusiasm is much more relaxed. Mm-hmm. Wonderful.
Good.
This was great. Thanks so much. I want you to mention your website again.
It's pennypierce.com, and it's spelled oddly, Penney and PeiRce.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. And people can also go over to sarahsanacroce.com/1 page, number 1 in page, to get the gentle marketing plan with the 7 Ps for the mandala. So thanks so much. And we'll have one more episode for you guys. So tune back in next week when we talk about promotions. So a big one for marketing. See you soon.
Yes. Okay. Bye.
Yeah, next week will be the last episode of this series, and we'll speak about the P for promotion. So if you found this episode interesting, make sure to tune back in next week for this final one where we wrap up with the P of promotion. And as I said in the last episode, I'm preparing a page where you can still access the ones that you missed and just have everything in one page. Also, we'll include the videos there. So But you're just going to have to be patient one more week. So come back next week. Thanks so much for listening. This Friday, I have a regular episode going out about the P of partnerships. Don't miss it. It'll be a good one. I have a great guest there as well. So let's be the change we want to see in the world. I speak to you soon.